Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to this week's Bimbo Mentality. This episode might be a little bit different tonally from what you're used to from this podcast. During the course of this conversation, we veer into some weightier subjects, most notably around child abuse, endangerment, and neglect, and the politicization of such. Content warnings apply. Hi everybody, welcome back to Bimbo Mentality, a podcast where we talk about things. My name is Bug, that's Emma. How are you, Emma?
I'm doing pretty good, all things considered. I just slathered on like half a gallon of hydrocortisone cream on my face, but I have some wine now, so all in all, I think I came out ahead.
That's excellent. I mean the wine part, not the hydrocortisone cream part, but I'm glad that everything is sort of coming up Emma in the end.
Always does.
Listeners who may have previously been critical of my excess coffee consumption, because apparently 8 to 10 cups a day is not normal, will be pleased to know that I am sipping into a tasteful herbal caffeine-free tea this evening. Over in the producer booth doing producer shit, it's Lilith. How are you, Lilith?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, you know, uh, 10 more weeks till baseball's back. That's where I'm at right now,
10
honestly.
more weeks to baseball back until baseball's back.
Yeah, I think I liked winter before I started watching baseball because now is no baseball season.
Yeah,
It makes
that
me
makes
sad.
sense. It's been a rough one too. Although last baseball season, sort of famously, you had your heart broken, so hopefully that will not.
I did, but it's the heartbreak that makes it like I miss the heartbreak now. I want it back. I
The heartbreak is part of the experience.
Yeah. It's better that the two have loved than lost. The ALCS than to not get there at all or something. I
The
don't know. Do
spirit.
you want to start the real shit?
Yeah, joining us on the podcast this week is our guest, Heloïse. Heloïse is a former labor organizer and policy analyst who has been working with the government at the local, state, and federal levels for the last 8 years. Welcome to the podcast, Heloïse. Happy to have you here. How are you?
Hi, thanks. I'm great. I am drinking currently a Sprite Zero because I just got out of work and I have to go to work again in like less than 12 hours. So trying to keep it
Lord.
caffeine free and also alcohol free.
Well, we appreciate you taking that brief window of time that you have to sit down and try your best to tell us about what it is that you do. You feel ready to think like a bimbo and talk about your profession?
Yeah, listen, half of my profession is explaining to people really simple concepts. I feel like I am in the zone as we speak. I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Why don't you go ahead and tell us then a little bit about what it is you do? Tell us what about this role you fill.
Okay, so in my previous jobs, like you said, I was a former labor organizer and policy analyst. So, which are two separate things. The policy aspect of my job that I did was threefold. I worked with medical professionals at the state level and provided training and resources on how to provide competent and compassionate care to LGBTQ patients and particularly transgender patients. So that was a big portion of my job, especially early on. I also worked with sexual violence victim advocate services on working with LGBTQ victims of sexual violence, and also did this kind of thing where I work with the government through both analyzing policy and following like the legislative session. And that towards the end of my tenure became more and more what my bread and butter was kind of working on this political aspect of things for the 60 days that our legislature was in session. And also that includes doing things with the federal government as needed and also with local governments as needed. My main focus was the state government.
All right, wait, hold up. I already have a question about this. The legislature is
Sure.
only in session for 60 days.
Okay, so I'm so happy you asked. So every state is different, and also every state is so similar that I'm going to tonight when we talk about this stuff, the things I say will be almost universally applicable to every state government and also our federal government. There are very minor and specific idiosyncrasies between states and the federal government. So, in the state that I worked in and still work in, West Virginia, the legislature is in session for 60 days. Fun fact, actually, tonight, as of this recording, we are 12 hours away from sessions starting. So the session starts tomorrow at 11 a.m., I believe. So this was a very apt time to record this podcast.
The West Virginia state legislature session is shorter than a season of Survivor.
That is absolutely true. We are a part-time legislature. What that means is that our legislators are paid, I believe, $20,000 a year, and all of them have other jobs. Some states do full-time legislative sessions. I think New Hampshire is one of those that is full-time. And some states do less often than we do. We meet once a year for 60 days, not including special sessions or interims. But I believe it's going to come to me. I think Texas potentially. Texas only meets like every other year. It might not be Texas. There is a state that only meets once every other year.
How the hell does anything get done? What if some crazy shit happens that requires a response?
As a Texan, I can tell you, shit does not get done, is the answer.
Well, if I can't speak to the Texas legislature, I've never worked in Texas. I have friends who have worked in the Texas legislature. They say similarly, things don't generally get done. However, to answer your question, Bug, of what happens if something really needs to get done, we can actually, the state of West Virginia has it in the state constitution that we can call a special session. So if something wild happens and the governor's like, ooh, we have to do something and make a law about this, he can call a special session for the purposes of working on legislation specific to that, or 3/5 of the legislature itself can vote to have a special session. The 60 days is just what we call the regular session, and that is what's built into the state constitution. Special sessions can happen any time of the year if it feels like they're needed. We actually had a special session called, I believe in 2023 or 2024. Whenever the Dobbs decision came down, we called a special session to ban abortion like a week after the decision came down. So, yeah, we called a session immediately in the fall to ban abortion.
Oof, that's rough. I was gonna ask if special sessions ever get called for like real things that are supposed to make people's lives better, or if they only get called to exploit right-wing grievance into making everybody's life worse. And it sounds like there's an answer to that question.
Is this Bimbo mentality or smart girl mentality? That was a hard-hitting question. The answer is it depends. Depends on who runs it depends on the majority of the legislatures, and depends on who the governor is and how each state's specifics work. But sometimes people call special sessions for real things. I know in the past we've called special sessions to address a murder. I believe 10 years ago we called a special session to address a murder. We passed a law that changed how CPS could interact with kids based on certain things. So there is occasionally special sessions that are called to address real kind of immediate things that we weren't thinking of. But generally, special sessions aren't that common any way you slice it, but they can happen.
I am sort of intrigued by this whole special session to solve a murder type of thing. Just because my immediate thought is that this is a sort of statewide Agatha Christie situation where like the murder is getting solved in the state legislative chamber.
Oh, So this was before I worked in politics at the state level, so don't quote me on any of this. But there was a really high profile murder case, and I believe we called a special session not to solve the murder. They were completely content to let law enforcement deal with solving the murder and the trial and dealing with all of that.
That's honestly a little disappointing.
I'm so sorry. The government's actually really boring. You'll learn. This is gonna be a very boring episode. But they called a session to, I think, make legislation kind of preventing this from happening again in the way that it happened. So another example, this was in a regular session. Last year, there was a high-profile case of a child who was getting CPS called on them, on the parents, and the CPS investigated and learned that this child was being neglected, and through the school system, that's how CPS was tipped off. And in response to that CPS call, the child wasn't taken from the parents that immediately. And what happened was the parents pulled that child out of school and homeschooled the child. And a lot of stuff happened in between. I think there were more CPS calls. I don't know all of the specifics, but the end of it ended with the child dying. By the time CPS found them, the child was emaciated and the child died of malnutrition. I think a couple weeks after CPS actually took the child away from their parents. And so the legislature introduced a bill to make it a requirement that if you have a CPS investigation on you with your children, you can't take those children out of the public school system that they're in. So
that's yeah.
Now that law did not become that legislation did not end up becoming law. However, it wasn't the process. The process is there's a lot that goes into how a bill becomes a law. And I'm not exactly sure the specifics of that specific bill, but I do remember that did not end up becoming law, if I'm remembering correctly.
What a twist to that story! And I'm gonna come back to the process, but I do want to just sort of wow, that's all really fucked up. I do, however, sort of personally appreciate that Bimbo Mentality can get in for just this one episode on some of that sweet true crime podcast money. So I do appreciate you giving us that.
I'm sure if you investigate this fully, I have left out so many details and gotten a couple things wrong. So I apologize to all the true crime fans out there. The murder from a decade ago, I barely remember the specifics, and the child thing is really sad. And I'm missing a lot of details in the short term, in the medium, like what happened. I just know the end effect was they tried to pass that legislation. It did not go through.
I am astonished by that. Like, what? How did that not happen? Tell us about this process that makes that not happen.
So the West Virginia the West Virginia legislature, the state of West Virginia, much like the federal government, has three branches of government. It has the legislative branch, it has the executive branch, and it has the judicial branch. And really the major difference between the federal and state levels for West Virginia and the United States are in the executive branch, a lot of the positions that the president appoints at the federal level, think the attorney general, the secretary of state, those kinds of secretaries of departments, where the president appoints those. In West Virginia, we elect most of those. So we elect our attorney general, we elect our secretary of state, we elect the state auditor, et cetera, et cetera. And in the judicial branch, we also elect Supreme Court justices on the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. So, and also I think we also elect county circuit courts, circuit clerks. So that's the major difference in how those things work. The legislative branch in the state of West Virginia is bicameral, just like it is in the federal government. That means there are two houses. There's a lower chamber, the House of Representatives, in the federal government, and the Senate in the federal government's the upper chamber. In the state of West Virginia, it's the House of Delegates, and then the upper chamber is the state Senate. every state that I'm aware of, with the exception of, I think, Nebraska, is also bicameral. They have 2 chambers. Nebraska is the only unicameral legislature in the country, and they only have 1 chamber. And that is pretty much across the board, every state, with the exception of, I can't speak to territories. So like Puerto Rico, Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, I'm not particularly well-versed in how their governments operate. But within the 50 states, this is everything pretty much functions generally the same way. There's minor idiosyncrasies.
Are they all designed to make sure that good things never happen?
I don't think they're so that's a great question. I'm going to be as charitable as possible. I think that a lot of state constitutions, like the federal constitution, has a lot of guardrails in place to kind of make sure that people don't run away mad with power. And in a lot of instances, that the people in charge of the guardrails can also just use it to impede progress at every turn. So to answer your question, I mean, yeah, kind of, but it's mostly because there's not necessarily a political will to do good things from a lot of state legislatures, or, they run out of time, or there's some other thing. What was the original question? I'm so sorry. I got off talking about the executive branch and the 3 branches of government.
Yeah, I think we were talking about like how the process that makes it so that a common sense thing where parents can't hide the children that they're going to murder did not become law.
The process through which a bill becomes a law, I think, is what you're asking. So the process through which a bill becomes a law is very simple. It's a time-consuming process, but it is pretty easy to follow. You introduce a bill. Anyone can introduce a bill. Like, any single delegate or state senator can introduce a bill. There's 134 people in the state legislature, and any one of them can introduce a bill. And what happens is they'll introduce a bill. Let's just for the sake of this example, say it's introduced in the House. So a delegate will have a bill written up, say, I want a bill that does this. Let's just say, I want a bill that makes it to where teachers' classes are capped at 20 students. Let's just say that's the bill, right? So they'll go to the bill writers. They'll say, hey, I want a bill that does this. The bill writers will write that bill. They'll present it to the House, Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House will introduce the bill in session, and then he will, in our legislature, the Speaker of the House is a man, or what was previously. I'm not sure who will be the Speaker of the House for this legislative session. I think they haven't voted on that yet, or if they have, I haven't paid attention yet. But he will then read the bill, introduce it, and then it will be referenced to committees. Each House chamber has a committee, a number of committees. So we'll have like a health committee, a committee for veteran affairs, an urban development committee, for instance, a judiciary, all sorts of committees that focus on specific things. And he'll reference it to one or more committees. So it'll get sent to that committee. That committee will then take it up. They can debate it. They can propose amendments to it. They can, bring in expert testimony about the bill, whether or not it's good or bad. And then everyone on the committee will vote on it. And if it passes out of the committee, if it's referenced to more committees, it'll go to those committees where the process will repeat itself. And once it's passed through all the committees that it needs to pass through, it'll go to the floor, where it'll be read for 3 days. First day is just notice like, hey, this bill, we're considering this bill. It'll get voted on. And then the second day it's read is the amendment phase, where people can propose amendments that are germane to the bill. And then on the third day is the final reading, and you vote to pass it. And if it passes out of the House, for instance, if this bill passes out of the House, it gets sent to the Senate. And that process repeats all over again. And that process can take weeks.
3 days is a long time to be reading a bill. I bet I could read it in way shorter.
So bills can actually be very long, and one of the stalling techniques that oppositions can use, at least in our legislature, is they can ask for bills to be read in their entirety, and that can take up a ton of time. So if you have 30 bills you're considering on the last day of session, the opposition can just say, we want you to read, we request all the bills be read in full. And that can take so much time that you actually run the clock out on passing bills. That can be like an actual delaying tactic because some bills can be so long.
What? Huh?
Some bills can be like 40 pages.
Well, okay, I mean, I can read 40 pages in less than 3 days.
But can you read 30, but can you read out loud 30 sets of 40 pages in 3 days?
Well, no, but why
to a
don't
group
they
of
just
100 people?
Why don't they just do one bill at a time?
They do. The reason there's 3 days, though, is it's built into the Constitution. And a fun thing about the state legislature in West Virginia is at any point in time, they can vote to just say, actually, we're not going to follow that rule. We're going to do this. So at any point in time, the legislature can say, we don't want to read it 3 times. We don't want to send it to committees. We just want to discharge it to the floor and just start that immediately. And if they get enough votes, they can just kind of suspend that rule. It's not common, but they can do it. So that kind of gets into another thing where there's these rules, but also if you're in charge and you really want to do something, you can kind of suspend the rules and do it anyway if you get enough people to agree with you.
Well, I mean, I was going to say earlier, like, you mentioned earlier that there's a lot of guardrails in place to keep people from going mad with power. I have some constructive criticism about those guardrails because I don't know that they're working all that well right now.
I think a lot of legal experts would agree with that, and a lot of constitutional lawyers would say that's accurate. I will pass that along to the state legislature of West Virginia, and see what they say.
Thank you. I would like them
You're
to be
welcome.
aware that I think that their system is dog shit.
Okay, I will.
That's what they like to hear.
You could in fact probably tell your state government that. I'm sure your state government functions much the same way that ours does.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think that, I sit here as a humble bimbo saying that if you've put these guardrails in place that are supposed to make it so that people don't go mad with power, and the result is that on the one hand, people are going mad with power and doing a lot of really bad stuff, to put it lightly. And on the other hand, people are deliberately exploiting these exploiting these rules to make it harder, to make it so that, like, you can't pass a law making it harder to murder your child by technicality. That sounds bad.
So this also kind of gets into the whole concept of a lot of the state constitutions and a lot of our federal rules and laws are really boiled down to what can you reasonably convince your colleagues to believe, right? So going back to the amendment phase, right? One of the big things is if you propose an amendment, it has to be germane to the bill, right? And that really is left up to the interpretation of everyone who is in wherever the chamber that you're talking about that is. If it's in the committee hearing, it's the members of the committee or the head of the committee. If it's in the House, it's the Speaker of the House. Like, that person is the person that gets to determine what is germane to a bill and what is not. So, the law is kind of what can you convince a jury or a judge? And if you can convince a judge that this is the law, then that's the law, right? Even if you don't necessarily, other people might go, that's not the law. That's very obviously not the law. If you can convince, for instance, the Supreme Court that it's the law and they say that's the law, then in our country, that is the law, right? So that's another kind of aspect to it, is if you have enough power and you have enough people in power within your whatever it is, within the state, within the legislature, the rules are kind of whatever you can get everyone to agree the rules are.
So, working within this system must be a goddamn nightmare, right?
It depends. It's not. I'll tell you right now, we're not having the. I don't have the greatest time right now, but sometimes the system surprises you in fun and interesting ways. So sometimes we get to use these guardrails against people in a way that I think is funny, and beautiful. So a specific example in the West Virginia State Legislature is we have a 60-day session. It goes from this year, I believe it goes from January 14th to March 14th, and it ends at midnight. And anything after midnight is just not allowed, right? Like at midnight, we're done. We adjourn sine die, which just means on the last day, it means there won't be a day afterwards. So if you can't get something passed by midnight on the 60th day, it does not pass. And that has actually happened in the past, where I think, if I remember correctly, it was an anti-DEI bill. I forget the specifics. A couple years ago, they tried to pass, it was like a combination. It was a critical race theory bill and a don't say gay bill, I think, kind of wrapped up into one. There was a bill that we were watching that we were trying to prevent from passing. And the opposition, the Democrats in this case, the party that was in the minority, was able to delay the session on the last day long enough by actually making them read the entirety of the bills. They were able to delay the vote on the critical race theory, DEI, don't say gay bill until like 12:05. And because it didn't pass to 12:05, it just did not become law. So sometimes the system works in your favor, and when it does, it's really nice. But it's also very frustrating sometimes to do this work, for sure.
Do you know the little the bill from Schoolhouse Rock?
I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill.
Yeah, he's sitting on Capitol Hill. Okay. Yeah.
It's
like
so
know him
annoying.
Personally?
Yeah, actually, me and the bill from Schoolhouse Rock, we're besties. We get drinks every Friday during session.
I think it's a little bit fucked up that the Bill's parents named a Bill. Like, be a little bit more creative about it.
We don't call him Bill. We call him William H. Macy.
You got me with that one.
If William H. Macy is listening to this podcast, I'm so sorry, Sarah. I love your work.
If William H. Macy is listening to this podcast, I loved you as the shoveler.
Yes. Oh my god, I was gonna bring up Mystery Men. Oh my god.
A movie that I have seen many times because my parents had it on VHS when I was a kid, and that's pretty much the only standard by which whether I've watched a movie or not.
He and Frances McDormand are like basically the entirety of what I think of when I think of the Minnesota accent because of the movie Fargo. So that is kind of what I associate him most with.
A movie I have not seen.
Oh, you got it. That one's good.
It's an eclectic mix of films that I have seen. I recently just sort of uncovered my DVD collection and was reminded of the fact that due I should say on the record, to a joke gift in my personal history, that I own on DVD two incredibly water-damaged copies of the film I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, still in the packaging.
I love that they're still in the packaging. That's iconic.
So that's the tier of film that I've been collecting.
Not watching, just collecting, because they're still in the packaging.
Why are you treating Kevin James movies like action, like expensive action?
No, it's not that they're still in the packaging because it's important to me for them to be in the packaging. It's because I've never had a reason to take them out of the packaging because I'm not gonna watch that movie.
because you already have it on Blu-ray, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think I own a single Blu-ray, alas.
How dare you disrespect Kevin James like this?
If I did own a Blu-ray, it would be a copy of I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, still in the packaging. You know, a movie about gay marriage, which famously is a legal principle that West Virginia didn't do until somebody told them they had to.
Listen, you're right. That is true. I would also come out and say that happened with a lot of states. You can't just throw us under the bus there. But yeah, no, we did not do that until the federal government told us we had to. We also did not make it legal to not discriminate against LGBTQ people in employment until the federal government told us we had to. So, yes. But that's actually true for a lot of states. A lot of states won't do something until the government tells them they have to. It's just sometimes you want to be on the other end. You want to be ahead of the game as opposed to not ahead of the game.
I don't do a lot of things until the federal government tells me I have to. Like,
but yeah, are you out here filing your taxes, in December before you can't? Like, what are you doing?
Okay, but if there is one thing that I will do, whether the federal government tells me I can or not, it's hot gay sex.
The federal government can't take that away from you unless you live in Boston, or Massachusetts, in which case the government can take that away from you because they've made kink illegal.
What?
Wait, what?
Zoinks?
Oh, yeah. So I learned this recently. In the state of Massachusetts, there were 2 legal cases that the judges in those legal cases kind of went out of their way to say that basically doing kink is illegal. Like, I think in the specific instance of one, it was BDSM. I do not have all of the details memorized, so I am probably not recalling this entirely correctly. So, if someone from Massachusetts wants to give the correct story, I'm happy to be wrong on this or to have missed some things. But my understanding is that there was a situation where 2 men entered into a BDSM relationship that ended in one of them dying. And it was argued, oh, well, this person should go to jail for murder because they violated consent. In which case, I believe that actually, like, the situation was this person did violate consent. However, the court interpreted that, like, because it's kink, you can't consent to it at all, and that's why it was illegal and bad in murder, was because just engaging in kink in the first place was going against consent. So, yes, in the state of Massachusetts, kink is illegal.
Okay, this is now the second time where, like, in this podcast, where we've talked about a situation where, like, the legal system really overcomplicated this whole murder is bad thing. Like,
yes.
Can't we just have a sort of standing principle that you shouldn't murder people?
We do, to be clear. Murder is in fact illegal. I don't know if you do that.
Apparently not, because we keep fighting about it.
Murder is illegal, except when certain people do it, but again, all of this boils down to what can you convince a judge or what can you convince a court of appeals or the Supreme Court, right? If you can convince the Supreme Court that this is actually fine and good and the Supreme Court agrees with you, it doesn't really matter what the law is, right? So not to talk too much about a specific situation in the federal government right now, but I know the Supreme Court has agreed to hear arguments about birthright citizenship. And, that is directly, explicitly written in the Constitution, that's, like, explicitly...
I was gonna say, even I know that that's, like, not... There's not actually any real authentic debate there.
Yeah, it's explicitly written in the Constitution that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. Now, I am ever the optimist, and I believe the Supreme Court will agree with that. However, there is a chance the Supreme Court says, actually, that's not true. And if the Supreme Court says it's not true, then that's the Supreme Court. They are the ones that are the arbiters of like how to interpret the law, right? So, it really just a lot of it boils down to what can you convince a judge, what can you convince a court of appeals, what can you convince the Supreme Court, what can you convince your colleagues in a chamber as to what is good and proper and the good following of the rules, right? Or is this a worthwhile situation to suspend the rules?
Is there a takeaway from this other than that just the law is fake?
The law is very real. Please do not go out and break the law thinking it is fake. It is very real.
No, that's not what I mean. But it's just
No,
like the law is a rhetorical trick.
So yeah, in a legal sense, again, a lot of this stuff we have laws. We have laws, and those laws are real laws, and you're supposed to follow those laws. And also, there's a lot of opportunities for people to really push up against those guardrails and push up against kind of the spirit of what everything is about to say, well, actually, this is the law now, or, and lawyers make arguments all the time that aren't necessarily legally sound, but they have to because their client needs them to, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's nothing new to see someone say, oh, well, the law, we can interpret the law this way. It's just sometimes someone interprets the law in a really kind of absurd way, and then those people are also sometimes in positions of enough power to make that have an effect on everybody in a population, such as a federal circuit or a state or even the entire country in the case of the Supreme Court.
Oof.
Is this the most depressing episode of Bimbo Mentality you've ever recorded? I'm so sorry.
Very possibly. I mean, okay. I guess we should talk about the sort of girl twink elephant in the room, which is that this is a podcast full of trans women, and wow, the legal system. But it's a weird, alarming, scary time where the law does not seem to be particularly interested in protecting us, and in fact seems to be really have its eyes set on sort of using those systems to antagonize us as much as possible. Do you have any commentary on that, Heloïse?
Yeah, so I have commentary on that from two perspectives. One, sometimes it is very real. So it is very real. It's very much so true that the federal government currently, under the current administration, seems to be directly targeting trans people for. I don't want to be too alarmist. I don't know. I don't want to say. I want to be careful with my words here. I want to hedge myself slightly. But the federal government is absolutely targeting trans people in a way that is trying to at least shut us out of public life. So that's probably the best case scenario as to what they're trying to do right now, is just kind of shut us out of public life. And a lot of state governments, depending on the makeup of those state legislatures, are following suit. So there is a very real thing that is happening. And because of that, we're seeing a lot more legislation across the country that is targeted to trans people, and sometimes to trans women or trans men specifically, that is very bad. Sports bans are one of the big ones. Bathroom bills are starting to make the rounds again. Gender affirming care bans for minors. Some states are now talking about extending that to adults. Some states are talking about extending, taking it to where insurance can't cover this kind of care anymore when it used to. So it is very real, and it is a very scary time. So I don't absolutely yes, that is true. And also sometimes I think some of the things that the opposition, people who are opposed to trans rights, do, uh, they they do basically showmanship to scare trans people, and sometimes, and that works a lot. And I think it's important to be educated in how the process and how everything works, so you don't take the bait and get scared about things that aren't things that you should be scared about, if that makes sense.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, what are the signs that we should be looking out for that something is bait or something is something that we actually need to worry about?
So, in pretty much every legislature across the country, and also in the federal government, any singular person can introduce a bill, right? So any one person can introduce a bill. I looked it up at one point. I think we have something like maybe 2,500 state and federal legislators, maybe that more than that, maybe closer to 6,000. There are a lot of people that could just introduce a bill. That's important to note, right? So, in a bill, anyone can introduce a bill, and a bill can be anything. A bill can be blatantly unconstitutional. For example, in the state of West Virginia, I believe it was 2017 it was 2018, it was 2019. It was after the 2018 election. The 2019 regular session, a couple of delegates introduced a bill to take funds from the West Virginia Tax Discretionary Fund or some such and give it to Donald Trump to help, quote unquote, build the wall. That is blatantly against the West Virginia Constitution. We cannot do that. We cannot do that as written in the state constitution. We cannot give money to the federal government from our taxes. We are not allowed to do that. So that bill was never going anywhere because it couldn't go anywhere because we can't do that, right? So there's a lot of bills like that. Any one person can introduce a bill. So it's important to kind of know the signs of, does this bill have legs? So, for instance, if you're in tune with your state legislature, you'll kind of learn who the far radical people are that kind of introduce these, for lack of a better word, absurd bills that never go anywhere. So, if one of our one of our guys that basically their whole thing is introducing these kind of insane bills and coming out and grandstanding and making a big public show, and just kind of throwing red meat to their base, as it were. If they introduced a bill, for instance, a couple years ago, someone did that where they introduced a bill saying that trans people couldn't be within 1,000 feet of a school, right? That was the bill. Whatever was designated as a school zone. That bill went nowhere. That bill got introduced and promptly just died, right? So, and to go back to what I was talking about earlier, do you remember that big long process about how a bill becomes a law at least in the state legislature of West Virginia?
I do. I want to briefly pause to say that I think that they should make it so that bills can introduce themselves, because I do not think that one of our most esteemed thespians, William H. Macy, should have to wait for some other guy to introduce him to the floor. I think that he should just be able to go in there and say, "Hi, I'm William H. Macy. Make me a law."
I actually agree with that. If William H. Macy came into the House chambers and said, "Hi, I'm William H. Macy. I'm introducing myself," I'd be like, "Go off, King. Get referenced. I support you." But the good thing about a lot of these bills is that the process between where a bill gets introduced until it becomes law, there's so many steps, and in any one of those steps, a bill can just die. So,
wait, are you saying William H. Macy is gonna die?
I hope not.
Poor guy dying on the floor of the West Virginia state legislature.
Fuck, that sucks.
Yeah, that's not where you want to go.
I agree. I wouldn't want to die on the floor of the West Virginia state legislature either. But yeah, there are so many places, there's so many steps where a bill can die and just never become law. There's also, if you propose amendments between the chambers, there's a big long process. If the bill passes out of the House, that goes to the Senate, and there's changes to that bill in the Senate that they pass, has to go back to the House. And after all of that, that can take a long time. And after all of that, the governor can still veto the bill, which in West Virginia isn't that meaningful. That's usually symbolic, except in very special circumstances, because West Virginia just has a simple majority to overturn a governor veto. So usually, if a governor vetoes a bill, it's mostly symbolic. But there are special exceptions where the veto holds. But yeah, there's a lot of places where a bill can die. So what you want to look at is a lot of bills will have sponsors. So you can introduce a bill, this is the person who introduces the bill, and they have this number of other people in the chamber who introduced it with them, right? And if the people on that list are the Speaker of the House, or the majority leader, or like the chairmans of important committees, or committees where that bill is likely to get referenced to, that can be a warning sign that, ooh, this bill might have legs, right? If it's getting taken up in committee and it's getting and they're doing hearings on it, then, maybe you're like, oh, we should request public comment on this, right? That's a thing you can do. But a lot of the times, a lot of these bills that are absurd will just kind of get introduced, go to committee, and never get taken up on an agenda. And people will call and go, oh my goodness, did you, there's this bill that got introduced where they're going to just outlaw being trans, just directly. Should we move? And I'm like, well, not because of that. You might want to move for other reasons, but that bill's not going to go anywhere because it got introduced 2 weeks ago and no committees touched it. You want to look for people who are movers and shakers, as it were, in the chambers. And if it starts getting put on agendas and people start drumming up support with it with the media, that's when it's like, ooh, this bill might go somewhere.
I think there's a lot of useful information there. I think that we are kind of getting to the point in the podcast where it's kind of time to move into the what we learned today section. But I do feel moved to say, and I know, Heloïse, you're being sort of very diplomatic, and I applaud that. But, just speaking as from my own voice as a civilian, we deserve better from our leaders than just sort of them using tactic, using these mechanisms to bully and scare people. If you're an elected leader in this country, do your job and make laws that actually make people's lives better. Or get out of the way.
To be clear, I agree with that 100%. I think that legislators who introduce bills that they know have no chance of going anywhere, that just serve to hurt people, I think they are doing bad things. They should not do those things. And I constantly wish for people who I talk to and work with, and people who work at the legislature, who actually are interested in passing laws that are for the public good and help people. I am 100% in agreement with you there. Kind of what I have to do is make sure that when people who are not well versed in the system reach out to me, I have to kind of do that thing where I run, I guess, damage control, where I say, I see why you're concerned. Here's why you shouldn't be concerned. But the fact that it's happening at all, I do agree, is bad and should not be happening.
One thing that we talked a lot about in several classes when I was an undergrad, which is forever ago, was I would love your take on term limits, because a lot of people, it's sort of an quote unquote, I think it's kind of an easy concept where people seem immediately down with it, but then I think they sometimes haven't thought of the cons of what kind of people you would attract to join the legislature in a system like that, and what that looks like. And I just wondered, do you have a take on term limits in general, or
Oh, you're gonna hate my answer, because my answer is just the standard lawyer answer of it depends. Oof, that's such a good question. I do think that term limits would solve a problem that we have, where people are kind of becoming lifetime members of, you know, either the House of Representatives or the Senate. This is really common, I think, more so in the federal government than it is necessarily in certain state governments. I'm sure certain state governments do have this as well. It's not a
For sure.
super big thing in my state government, where we have like these people who are just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm a lifer, I don't really do anything, I don't really know what's going on. There's not a ton of that here. But it does solve the problem of, there are people who are very much like pretty obviously in some sort of cognitive decline and should not be making decisions for the entire country. We can think of, there are definitely some very prominent examples where people towards the end of their life were kind of getting wheeled into Senate hearings and being told how to vote. I think the term limits would solve that very specific problem for sure. As a blanket thing, I'm not sure. I'm sure there would be unintended things that would happen because of term limits that we don't currently foresee, that would also be bad. So I guess I'm, gun to my head kind of thing, I think I'm in support of term limits at the federal level. But I know that if we did come up with, I knew if term limits was a thing we ended up doing, there would definitely be some unintended consequences that we're not currently able to foresee that we would then have to address. But, we could also just address them as they came up. So I guess that's my kind of hedged answer that sort of did answer your question and sort of did pick a side.
No, that's good. I like it. I love it.
What if instead of term limits, they were turd limits and it limited how often you could poop in a week?
Fiber lovers would hate this.
My boss does that. It's fucked up.
Jesus Christ.
Fiber lovers would hate this.
If we had more time, Lilith, I would get into that with you. But
I'm more in support of turf limits, actually. I think that's another one we should have.
Oh, that's a good one.
Turf limits is good. Like, just limiting the number of turfs, or like just
Limit
none of them.
What they can do.
there should just be one who we can all dunk on the internet.
Okay.
And it's still Joanne.
I was gonna say, I think I have a good candidate for
It's just less famous. Emma, what did you learn today?
I think what I really liked the part about, like, I mean, I know it's always difficult for us, and we wake up every day and we get on, online and social media, and there's a new horror to face. And so what I really liked was like a reminder to understand that not everything, that gets reported on that is like just in committee is like not only not going to pass, but it wasn't even like put forth with an intent or an expectation of passing. It was theater done to scare us, because if we're scared and we don't go out in public, then they sort of won even without that happening. And so I think that's a good reminder. And that is the serious answer to what I am taking away today.
Oh yeah. I learned that a lot of state politics is just people spending 3 whole days trying to read William H. Macy. I learned that it's really hard to get to just sort of have an uncomplicated understanding that murder is bad. And I learned that sometimes people exploit systems to try to make it harder for progress to happen, and that is not Bimbo mentality. But I also learned that sometimes people exploit loopholes. Sometimes people just kind of ignore the rules for the sake of making things better for people, and I'll give that one a that's Bimbo mentality. Sure, we can celebrate those moments where the system works out in our favor, and things end up not being catastrophic. So I'll take it. If that's the only W we get these days, I'll take it. Heloïse, having heard what we have learned, do you feel like you were successful in thinking like a bimbo and teaching us about your field of expertise today?
Gosh, honestly, yes. William H. Macy, definitely. That I'm going to start using that when I talk to other people about it. I'm going to start referring to bills as William H. Macy's. So, yes.
And knowing you as well as I do, I believe you.
Oh, I will. I will say, oh yeah, that William H. Macy, she got no chance. Do I get the opportunity to say one last thing before we sign off? Because I feel like I've been pretty doom and gloom about this. I've painted a picture today that I think is mostly accurate based on my take. I'm also very cynical about the whole process at this point. I'm cynical and jaded. So there is absolutely a more fresh-faced, more optimistic view of all of this. But I will say I do think the system we currently have, as dysfunctional as it is better than just letting, whoever, like one person in charge do what they see fit. So I am thankful that this specific guardrail is up sometimes because it does prevent people from doing some particularly heinous things. And also the system, I think, is in drastic need of kind of a reimagining to get back to what it was meant to do, which is help the people that it serves. And also, this is just one piece of the puzzle for trans people and LGBTQ people and our rights. It's a big piece of the puzzle, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. There are so many other avenues that we can use and take to advance LGBTQ rights and LGBTQ well-being throughout the country. And this is just the one avenue that I have expertise and work in. So, this is not the end all be all, is what I will say.
Keep trying. Everybody keep trying. We'll figure it out.
We're going to make it.
We're going to make it. Heloïse, do you have any plugs or last minute comments for us before we close out?
Yeah, William H. Macy, if you're listening to this podcast, please return my calls. I have nothing to plug. Love you, mean it. Y'all are great. Fantastic.
Get on it, William H. Macy.
Do not dox me. Do not find me.
That's going to wrap us up this week on Bimbo Mentality. Stay strong, everybody. Our intro outro music is Runners by Sophia Noir. If you have a pitch for the podcast and want to tell us about something cool and fun you do, you can DM us on Blue Sky or Instagram, or send me an email at prettybug@proton.me. We will catch you in a couple weeks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Following the completion of the recording of this podcast, Heloïse reached out with some corrections and clarifications to some statements that she made. 1. West Virginia banned abortion in September 2022, not fall of 2024. 2. A special session was not called for the murder of Skylar Neese's related legislation that changed the way West Virginia issues Amber Alerts, colloquially referred to as Skylar's Law. It was brought up during the 2013 regular session once they identified Skylar's body and passed unanimously out of both chambers and was signed into law. 3. The CPS bill that we talked about, colloquially referred to as Rayleigh's Law, has passed out of the House at least twice in 2024 and 2025, but not passed out of the Senate. Heloïse also notes that it is worth noting that in 2013, when Skylar's Law passed, Democrats had a majority in both chambers and the governorship. Rayleigh's Law has only ever been proposed under Republican trifectas. Heloïse also notes that schools and child welfare is not her forte or expertise, so she's not sure if other steps have been taken internally within the West Virginia Board of Education or Child Protective Services to address this specific loophole.
breath 'cause you